Every once in a while, I read a book and wonder how I'm going to review it. I ask myself some questions and hope that I'm going to find the answers to them. Do I like the book? What is it about? What parts do I want to highlight to support my thoughts? And with this book, I really wasn't entirely sure what I needed to talk about. I enjoyed the book, and I guess we'll just work through how I'm going to talk about this. What Remains of Edith Finch is an interactive story about the Finch family. This family has a troubled past, which has been attributed to a curse, and isn't explained how the family actually was cursed, or how the curse could be lifted aside from the entire family dying off. The Finch family tried to escape this curse by moving from Norway to the Pacific Northwest in the United States. However, they also tried to bring their ancestral home with them. This house sunk into the sea and killed Odin Finch, the first, or at least like the elder of the family at that time. The player explores a new house that was built, and some of the bricks from the older house were used to build the new one, and that somehow transferred the curse from the old house into the new one, or at least that's what we're led to believe. Caleb talks about the opening of the game and the slow walk to the Finch house. This leads to the reveal that the player is playing as a pregnant woman. And I wonder how many people actually picked up on this on their first playthrough, or if they learned it once they got to the very end, or if one of their friends spoiled it for them, because that always happens. Christopher Finch, Edith's child, is pointed to as being the hero of the story by Caleb. That's kind of how he sees things. I don't think that there necessarily is a hero to this story. It kind of depends on how you view the actions of the different characters in it. Caleb spends some time sort of exploring this idea. I don't think he's wrong about it because of how ambiguous this story actually is. All we're sure of is that the Finch family is either very unlucky or they really have been cursed by something. We don't know if this curse is real or if the belief in it causes the curse to become real. Some family members believe in the curse, while others kind of fight against that belief. Some find evidence of the curse's existence in the death of the other family members, and others deny this altogether. With this in mind, let's talk a little bit about Dawn and Edie. Caleb brings up the conflict between Dawn, who is Edith's mother, and Edie, who is Edith's great-grandmother. This conflict is presented to us as science versus myth, or fantasy, if you will. Dawn represents science and facts, while Edie is more of the myth and fantasy type thing. Edie fully embraces the idea of this curse and tries to impose that reality onto the other family members. If you need to point a finger at a villain, it would probably be Edie. She does several things that put her family in harm's way, or she does things that feed into the idea of the curse and never tries to dispel any of that. She is a true believer in this idea that there is a curse, and she might be the one who originated the idea of a curse. Not every death could be attributed to Edie, of course. However, her inaction caused a few of them. Her decision to keep rooms of dead family members as shrines was odd, but it seemed like a way for her to deal with those deaths. Much like the invention of the curse, it felt like she was trying to rationalize what happened to her family members. Dawn initially rejects the idea of the curse, or at least rejects it in what is presented to us. We don't get a full picture of everything, and Caleb doesn't present like a full picture here because I don't think he can. She has her room filled with textbooks, and Caleb explains that this was her kind of looking in a different direction for an answer, not looking towards the curse, but looking towards science and facts. Dawn was a teacher, and that's really where she dealt with everything. She dealt with facts. She also escaped the home and tried to get Edith away from Edie's influence. But then she gives Edith the keys to the house so she can go back. So it's kind of weird. It's a strange thing to do for someone who has a plan to escape from the home and tries to keep it a secret as best she can. She seals many of the rooms to keep people out of them back at the Finch house. And it just felt like she was trying to stop this whole curse thing, or at least stop the belief in the curse by making it harder for people to interact with the curse in some way. It is one of the things I found interesting about this story. There are so many contradictions in the actions of the characters. Caleb sometimes points this out and lets the reader kind of make up their own conclusions to these actions, or these contradictions. Dawn and Edie's death are discussed at the end of the book, or near the end of the book. Caleb does an excellent job of discussing each of the Finch family deaths, and with these two, he actually gives fewer options for the cause of their death. That is because they have the least suspicious deaths out of all of the people in this book. Edie, it just seems like she dies of old age, and Dawn dies of some illness. We don't know if the curse, did anything to them, but at this point the curse seems to impact them. The curse didn't seem to impact them beyond being just a present fear. We don't get an answer to this question, but it's not for lack of trying on Caleb's part. He explains that the story is intentionally ambiguous. Even his interviews with the development team don't shed much light on the answers that many players would want to find out of a book like this. Most people like puzzles. We like solving puzzles and finding something, whether that something is good or bad or anything in between. When presented with a question, we want to have an answer to that question, or we want to find an answer to that question. When we don't get an answer, we usually create something to help make sense of why that question isn't answered, whether it's creating a new answer out of nothing or coming up with a better question that can be answered. Video games are no different. The games that tell a story offer players a chance to fill in the blanks that developers leave, whether those blanks were intentionally left or unintentionally left. It's one of the things that I really love about video games. Personally, I think the curse was made real by the Finch family's belief in it. Every death was seen as a piece of evidence of that curse. Edie played a very big role in creating the idea of the curse and the presence of monsters that would sometimes kill family members. What we're presented with is an incomplete narrative because we don't know anything about the curse back in Norway, and we don't know anything about family members that may have been left in Norway when Odin took some family members and this ancestral home with them across the ocean. Caleb points out something interesting when he goes over the deaths of the family members. There are several possible explanations for the deaths that can all be true, particularly when talking about the deaths early on that have been made more fantastical by the people that have narrated those deaths to us. For example, Molly turns into a series of animals before she dies. It is possible that a tentacle monster ate her, or that she was poisoned by the berries that she ate. Both of those explanations are possible, especially in a video game world. The curse could have manifested as a tentacle monster, even if that wouldn't have made sense in the real world. In the realm of a video game, yeah, that could definitely make sense. If the curse is real or not, it doesn't change the fact that members of the Finch family keep dying. Sometimes very early on in their life, sometimes by things that were very obviously accidents, other times under suspicious circumstances. The game ends with Christopher Finch. He's the last living member of the family that we know about at that time. This was the book's most confusing, creative, and fascinating part for me. There are 5 of these in the book, and part of me wonders how many others there could have been. Like, how many other letters did Caleb write before he settled on these 5? These letters are from the author to Christopher Finch, the last surviving member of the Finch family from the game. He's writing to a non-player control character. This is something new, as other people have probably done something similar, but it is a creative way to do it. Think of your favorite game, book, or television show. You've probably asked yourself a few questions after finishing it for the first time, and I'm sure there will be someone who says, well, I don't do that, but that's because, of course, there's going to be somebody that says that. However, if you look into any discussion forum of a piece of media, you'll find people who do something similar to what Caleb does with these letters. At first, I didn't know who he was talking to when I started reading them. It had been a while since I played What Remains of Edith Finch, and I didn't remember everything about it, and I definitely didn't really remember Christopher all that much. It quickly became apparent to me what Caleb was doing, though. The last letter to Christopher closes out the book, and it's the one that kind of struck a chord with me. Maybe it was due to it being the last part of the book, but what Caleb says in it is pretty fascinating. It asks some of the questions that I hadn't thought of. In this letter, Caleb gives the reader a few things to consider by asking Christopher some questions. Specifically, he asks Christopher if he's dead yet. He also asks where we go from here. These are the same questions that many gamers have asked about their favorite video games. I've done similar things myself when I reflect on a series of games, especially if it was unfinished or left open to interpretation. Sometimes there's a game that spans a significant amount of time. I often wonder what happened between the games, especially if the game only briefly touches on that time when introducing the plot of the next game. While reading some of the letters, we are also given some personal stories from Caleb. These tie into the themes that he wants to explore in the book, and this is a creative way to introduce those. The final letter ends the book. It is an excellent way to do this, especially with a game with an ending open to interpretation and speculation. You don't know if the curse is real or if Christopher got married and had children. It's simply a superb way to end the book. I'm glad I read this book. What Remains of Edith Finch is a game I don't remember too much about. It is one that is open to interpretation. It also brought a lot to the walking simulator genre, even if I don't like the name that has been associated with that genre at all. It tells you a story and leaves things to the player to decide if a curse really is causing the deaths of this family. In the end, the cause of the deaths doesn't change much. Those characters are still dead, and all that is left for the player is to decide if something supernatural happened. Caleb makes some great points about what is going on in the game. He also does an excellent job of incorporating the developer and the voice actor's thoughts. These add a lot of insight to the game's story. It is still up to the player and the reader to come to a conclusion, whether or not they believe what's going on or if they have their own idea. Well, I don't know how to talk about this book. I think I got everything I wanted into this. There are some things I missed or parts of the book that I considered more important than others. But much like the game, people will probably take different things from this book than I did. Suddenly I Was a Shark is a book that I highly recommend. Caleb does a spectacular job of describing what's going on in the game, what it means, and speculating on what is just happening. I walked away from this book wanting to know more about the game, and that's always a good thing. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.